welcome to Blockchain Gaming World, episode 113. I'm Jon Jordan, and very pleased joining me today is Jamie Jackson. How's it going, Jamie?
Good one, mate. Thanks for having me.
Good. So, Jamie is Chief Creative Officer at Mythical Games, so our second Mythical Games C-level exec. So we had Jon on, getting on last year, I think it was, probably. Always make space for the C-levels at Mythical Games. So, good to have you on. Sort of first question, you have been in games for a long time. You've worked on a lot of big titles, so it's always good to sort of get people, understanding where you've come from. And then also interesting, your transition into blockchain and how, I guess from a creative point of view, how was that exciting? Was that a little bit of a learning curve? But yeah, the potted history will be a good starting point.
Yeah, sure. It's long enough now that I don't know how it's like. It's like 22, 23 years. It's that like age where you just stop counting. I've done it. This is my full grown up job. So like I studied car design at university. So I was in like car and product design, and we were the last. My year was like the last year with doing it with pencils, right? And everyone behind us was getting taught how to do 3D modeling. And we were all like, well, me and mates were like, oh man, we're screwed, right? Because like they're not teaching us the tools, right? So I ended up teaching myself like 3D modeling in the third year, or a group of us did. We just kind of found this basement with a bunch of machines, and we were like, let's just figure it out. And a friend of mine ended up hitting me up. He was working at Codemasters at the time, which you will know well. But he hit me up. He's like, oh, you should come and apply for a job here. It's right up your street. Like, you're modeling cars, and the pay's good. And it was like one of those weird things where like I was a gamer, been a gamer since I was like a wee kid, and I just never computed that I could work in video games. Right? It was just this thing that, boom, existed somewhere. I never ever even thought about it. And I'm like, oh yeah, that sounds cool. So I went and I'd applied. I got a job at Codemasters just before I actually had to finish my final year at uni, which took so much pressure off, which is quite nice. So I started out my career as a car modeler for Colin McRae Rally. So the first game I ever worked on was Colin McRae Rally 2, which is an awesome game. So I kind of did Rally 2, Rally 3, and started to kind of cut my teeth a bit at Codemasters, and then started a company called Freestyle Games. We just kind of, me and a bunch of folks from there, we were just like, you know what, let's just give it a go. I didn't know what the hell I was doing, but I was young enough and kind of dumb enough to go, yeah, cool, let's give it a go, let's wing it. And we were all of us were car game vets, pretty much, right? So like design director for Toka and Colin, and like head of tech for those and stuff, and then a couple of other guys from GoldenEye. So we were going to go and make a driving game at Freestyle. That was our kind of what we set out to do. And then try and fast forward, we just sort of fell into making a PSP title, which was a breakdancing game, and we suddenly got into rhythm action, kind of by accident. We were just coming up with this cool concept, and a good friend of mine, Pete Hawley, was running Sony at the Sony kind of UK side at the time, and signed us up for a PSP project. So we were like, oh shit, we're going to learn how to make rhythm action games, right? So we started doing that, which was a ton of fun, and then the kind of Guitar Hero exploded, right? And at the time we were making a product, we were designing a kind of concept for Wii, which was like all the elements of hip hop, is like rapping and graffiti and DJing and whatever. And we were like, oh wait a minute, this guitar thing's pretty cool. Maybe we should just focus on the DJ thing. So we came up with DJ Hero, and we ended up getting acquired by Activision because of that deal. There's a whole other story about how that happened, but that will take a while, and it's quite funny, and I don't know how much of it I can say. But so I did DJ Hero. We created it. It was kind of, we built the controller in my garage one winter, which was cool. One of the engineers hotwired an Xbox controller, and I built this thing out of cardboard foam and hot glue, and it was cool. So it was a good time. So I did that, and then at Activision we worked on the Hero franchise for quite a while. So we did DJ Hero 1 and 2, and my team also did a lot of work on Guitar Hero, because there's this huge DLC content that we built a team of doing that. So we got really into music games, and we did a ton of that stuff. We worked, which is where I met John Linden, because he was kind of looking after a studio over there. We worked together. We helped each other out, which is pretty cool. Did some work on some Skylanders products. Did a little bit of work on some Call of Duty products. So did a whole run at Activision, which was really cool. It was learned a lot.
It's sort of funny how that you sort of maybe not you, but I sort of forget how big those sort of hardware-based sort of music games were. I mean, they were absolute phenomenal. They just blew up. They were massive, and even Skylanders. I mean, absolutely enormous. And then they sort of very quickly sort of went away again. But for that period of time, it was very interesting. I'm sure, to be working on those.
It was huge. It was huge, and it was really fun to design games with a peripheral in mind, right? Like something that you could actually then design to work with the game. It's interesting. I don't know whether they'll ever come back, right? I don't know. It'd be interesting to see if that cycle makes its way back round. But there was definitely some magic with those games, Guitar Hero and Rock Band and DJ Hero. It made you feel like you could do something musically that you probably couldn't actually do, which that's the dream, right? So I was there I was Activision for about almost 10 years. Wild times, good times, lots of fun product. And then I left around about 2015. And that's kind of where my journey, or where I started to become aware of blockchain a little bit, right? And the technology. So I started a little company called Slingshot Cartel with just a small handful of us in the UK. And we had this theory of we could maybe make video games in a different way. And I just done Guitar Hero Live. It was the last game I did at Activision, where we kind of tried to reinvent Guitar Hero. We had GHTV, which was like MTV that you could play tracks on, which was pretty dope. And then we had Guitar Hero Live, which was, we kind of filmed everything, right? So that we even lent into tech that Spielberg was doing for Tintin, and we kind of advanced some of that tech, and we were using mocap cameras to drive robot arms. It was a really, really fun project, and I was like, we're all really proud of what came out of it. But I got to learn a lot about the movie industry and how it worked. And I think there's always been this narrative in games for as long as I've been in it, where people are like, games and movies are going to merge into one industry at some point, right? And they're not, because that's insane. But I do think where it became interesting to me was the way the industries work could influence each other, right? And I think video games, what we ended up doing, and this happens a lot, with the Activision, some of my studios, happens all over the place. You grow these teams, massive teams, to try and get a product out, right? And then you kind of have to pull this team down. And it becomes, it's tough, right? It's not fun. But that's how movies work. They just set it up differently, right? Like everyone's on a contractor, so the the riggers, they come in for the rigging and then they're on to another movie, right? So everything works in this really interesting way. And I was like, maybe there's a way to do it. So we kind of created that theory of can we build games in a different way? And we built this little game called Paper Golf that went out on Facebook when Facebook were redoing their gaming stuff, and it was cool. It took us 3 months, 12 people, 2 weeks. We had 10 million players, right? It was that's cool. But at the time, Facebook weren't really letting anyone monetize, so they were like, do you want to keep doing it? We're like, not really. And I could do with making some money, and they were like, yeah, that's coming. So, but it was interesting to test the theory, right? And we did another product that we just did a soft launch, just a kind of threw it out the door shooter thing we did called DRG Initiative on Steam, just put it out for a little bit. And unfortunately, we kind of dropped it the week Fortnite came out, so we just we were like this little boat and this thing.
No, I never played it, but there was definitely, I went to some conference talks about it. It's definitely interesting, the sort of esports spectator.
You're trying to bring in think about all the different ways people are playing games and talking about games and projecting the game. So anyway, that was a fun time. We learned a lot, but that's kind of where blockchain started to kind of land on my radar, because we're trying to think of different funding models for games as well, right? Like how can you fund things? And conversation came up with one of our investors, or early investors, and he was really starting to go down the rabbit hole of crypto in America, and he's like, hey, why don't we build a fund which is all crypto driven, right? And then we kind of all these people out there with all this crypto, and there's nowhere for them to spend it at the moment, right? So we could build this thing, the whole project could be wrapped in blockchain. The money comes in, you build the product, blockchain pays all the money out, and if people want to sell their stake and all this kind of stuff, they can do it. And I was like, oh yeah, that sounds cool, right? I was like, okay, that sounds really cool. I'm into it. So then I got my lawyers involved on the UK side, and they're like, you're gonna go to jail, stop immediately. And I was like, oh shit, that's really depressing. So
never ask the lawyers. Clearly, is the
I know. God, learned a lesson, right? but it was just like back in that time in the UK, it was just everyone was very like, cautious. So we didn't really pursue it, but that was how it landed on. That's how it kind of ended up in my sphere of thinking a little bit. So it was, so I just started to try and understand it a little bit more. Like I didn't fully grasp it. I don't think I still fully grasp everything today, but that's just it, right?
I don't think anyone, apart from maybe Vitalik, fully understands it. The whole thing is one of those things. There's an awful lot of trust at every level, I think.
Yeah, and but it just, I don't know, it flicked a switch. But I think back then I was just thinking about it from this funding point of view, right? I hadn't really thought about any of the other things. And then my wife, she works at Nintendo, and she was working out of Europe, and we always had this deal because she moved to Europe to live with me to finish Guitar Hero, and then the deal was when the next move is on her, right? Okay. So and she got called back to come to Nintendo of America for a big promotion and stuff, and she's a badass. She's really cool. She does way cooler stuff than I do. So I was like, okay, cool. Like, let's go. Right, we sort of packed up and moved to America. And that's when John called me, and he's like, hey, I'm thinking of starting a new company, but like basing it in blockchain, like using blockchain as kind of part of the foundation of what we do. And he kind of taught me through some of his ideas, and that was just sort of CryptoKitties was. If you paid attention, right, CryptoKitties was kind of this thing back then, and I was like, we talked about it a little bit, and it was, and I, at the time, I think I was a little bit like bored, burnt out with games, right? I was just like, we're just making the same game over and over and over again, and I was just like, you know what? I'll be a stay-at-home husband. My wife can keep me as a kept man. I'll take that. Sounds good. And then John kind of starts talking to me about this, and. As we started to just bounce ideas around this idea of using blockchain to just prove ownership, right? And just start to like, what is it? It's kind of like digital history, which that when I sort of think about that paradigm, I get really excited. The notion that I could own something in a game and it could retain the history of how I found it or who I've slain with it or, you know what I mean? Whatever it might be. I was like, oh man, that's really exciting, right? That's kind of cool. And this idea that you could limit things, because I'm a collector, you can probably see in my room, I've got surrounded by Warhammer and toys and all kind of stuff. So like the notion of collecting and is like it's totally in my wheelhouse, like I get it. So that's what got exciting, when all of a sudden flipping it from just a funding model into like what can it do to games and how can it change games. That's where it kind of got excited. So I kind of I got off the phone from John and went downstairs. I was like, so I think I'm gonna start a new startup. And my wife like just cracks up and she's like, cool, you've been retired for like 6 weeks, so good, well done. Of course you are. So yeah, that was kind of it.
And did you obviously for the last sort of year or so we've had a lot of heat around from some of the traditional big sort of game studios or developers at their studios with various sort of negative sort of takes on that. At that stage, obviously the sector was so small there was only enthusiasts in there. But did you have any sort of because obviously you come at it from a creative point of view? Did you have any sort of thoughts around maybe I can see why some people won't like this, or personally did you have any, or was it just pretty much this is a new tool, looks fantastic, we can make some new stuff with it?
No, I never did, and I I still don't, to be honest, because I think that. Like if I boil it, like just from my perspective, if I boil it down to what I think is kind of fundamentally interesting is moving away from owning a license to owning the thing. Like that to me is like, cause this, like we're in this, I was thinking about this earlier. I was like, what phase are we in of blockchain gaming? And I think a lot of people are like, oh, it's like mobile. I'm like, yeah, it kind of is. But if it is, I think we're still in the phase of Snake. Like we haven't got to iPhone yet, right? Yeah. Like that's kind of how I look at it a little bit. Because everyone forgets, like you had games on your phone long before iPhone, right? It's just they were these like silly little like fun, but whatever. And even with iPhone, when it kind of blew, like gaming and apps blew up, there was a lot of iterations of what the model looked like before it ended up where it did today, right? And so I don't even think we've quite got to that stage yet. But I never did, because I think the kind of economical impact thing, kind of came out around like the NFT sort of thing, right, phase, and I think a lot of people were just up in arms that like, how dare digital artists have a way to make money, right? Like, it's like, come on, man, digital artists have been screwed for years. Like, give them a break, So anyway, I think that kind of came out of left field, and when you dig into that economical impact, you got to compare it to all the other economical impacts, and then kind of draw a conclusion for yourself from that. Right? And I'll probably stay clear of that one today. But for me, it was just owning shit is interesting, and I don't necessarily think it's always going to be about these like super volatile secondary markets, right? If there's something really rare and someone really wants it, they're going to buy it, right? But I think there's also interesting paradigms like, I think about games I've spent money on.
Yeah. Right.
So I like 2 years ago, for 2 years, me and some friends played a lot of Call of Duty, right? Warzone, and before that, playing PUBG, right? So to start off with, I didn't spend any money because I'm like, I'm not spending any money, and then gradually, like the FOMO kicks in because all my mates turn up in these outfits, and I'm like, oh, okay, cool, I'll spend some money, right? So, but like, I haven't played PUBG for forever. I'd love to just go and sell my stuff. Like, it'd be so cool, right? And I've got stuff that you can't get anymore. Like, and if I could just sell it, and it doesn't mean I got a ton of money back. Someone's like, I'll give you $10 for that. I'm like, cool, sweet. I've got like $10 in my game fund again. So I think, like I say, that's the thing. Go on.
No, I was going to say it is. I mean, I think it's interesting, and as it's certainly having spoken to John, it's interesting that obviously Mythical are sort of aligned in this. You talk very much about that sort of a sort of conceptual model of you don't worry about any of the we're not talking about the details of any blockchain or anything like that. It is just John's famous thing. Gamers like to own the stuff there in games. Why would a developer not like a technology that allows gamers to own their stuff? Just clearly gamers want to do that, and obviously people sell their Fortnite accounts to do that. So it's already sort of there. So why would you not legitimize that and make it so no one gets ripped off and everyone sort of wins at a very basic level? I mean, it's
make it easy,
interesting,
make it safe, right? Like all of that kind of stuff makes a ton of sense. I've talked to a lot of people as well. Like, I've had some interesting discussion with people from the industry who are like, there's no problem to solve, and I find a lot of those people tend to come from like pretty hardcore free-to-play mobile, right, where they're kind of dependent on this notion of continually having to sell something new, right? And it is like, this does challenge that model, which is why I think, I kind of reference like where I think we are in the kind of evolution of like the idea of mobile, right? Is the model's still going to evolve. Like, people are still trying to figure it out. Like, is there a, will the sweatshop mechanic be the way that goes? I don't think it will, personally. I just don't. Like, I don't think that you're going to get 2 billion gamers interested in that kind of model. But, other variants of that could be. Like, there's going to be stuff we're going to keep trying, figuring out. The stuff we're doing with Rarity League, and the idea of owning guilds and how you manage that guild, and just giving owners a place that they can be, and they can recruit gamers into that guild with them, and they get access to new things that other people wouldn't get. Which kind of leans into that kind of play to own mechanic, especially when you get into like, I get access to players early, and I can get those players, and I can rip packs and blah blah blah. So like, I think those things, like, we obviously believe in that because that's the kind of thing we're building, right? But I just think like the still TBD. What, like, is there one final mechanic to rule them all, or does the fact that we can just own some stuff and we can trade it safely actually win? And that to me is what's exciting. And to go back to the point about, like, I would love it, me and you, we're playing whatever, the next Zelda together, and like, if I get this sword before you, it'd be really cool if there was a note that was like, hey John, Jamie got this before you, right? And like, I can show off a little bit, and that now my sword has that history attached to it. I think that's cool.
And I think it is interesting when you talk to people, I think more from the creative side. I've talked to a few sort of game designers who I've known over the years who now sort of get into blockchain, and they just, it takes them sometimes a bit of time, but then they sort of immediately see all this stuff we couldn't have done before, and they see it in a very game-centric way. Like, there are these things that we could never have done in games before that will make games more interesting. And obviously, you're not going to make exactly the same game on the blockchain you would off the blockchain, traditionally. Otherwise, sort of what's the point? But just these very new sort of mechanics, and a lot of them are built around stuff like that sort of social sharing or flexing or collaborative PvP, blah, blah, you know, it's all sort of mixed into that. But it's the ownership of the item that allows you to sort of do that in a you know a sort of authoritative way, rather than sort of what you have at the moment, which is a little bit bells and whistles.
Yeah. And trust, right? Like kind of that trust. And I think like I've had a lot of people say, well, you don't need blockchain to do this thing. I'm like, well, you know, you kind of do, because it's about the trust, and it's about saying, hey, you know, like we're never going to release another Billy Bones the way we did for the first Blankos, right? We just so you know, it kind of gives that kind of validity to that asset. And you know, like another great example, like Pete, who one of my pals that we played COD with, like he's got this SAS skin, right, from like 3 years ago or something. And he busts it out now and again, and like people are always like, "Dude, that's fucking red!" Like they, you know, they're like love it. And he just gets to flex it. And I, you know, he's a hoarder, so he'd probably never sell it. But if he could, and someone's like, "Dude, I'll give you $300 for it," I'm sure he'd sell it. Right?
Yeah, definitely.
Good. Thanks.
Cool. So let's get a bit more sort of specific about stuff. So few products working on now. I guess we have to talk about Blankos, because Blankos is the one, and you know, I've spent a lot of time and a lot of money in Blankos, so it's a good one to start with. I mean, it's definitely, you know, I just remembering like the first time I played Blankos. I mean, that was a very nothing to do with the blockchain, but the art vision on that was a very particular sort of thing. So, you know, how did that come about? Was that just sort of the where you were at the time, or was that sort of a JB unleashed or something? Because it was a really sort of solid. Trippy, you know, whatever adventure. Great, you know, really quite coherent as well as.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I appreciate that's cool, and we really appreciate that. So it's a bit of a lot like. So I've been collecting vinyl toys since like I was probably in my late teens, like early 20s or whatever, and so I've always been like slightly obsessed with them, and. I've always had in my head, like when I got into games, I was like, wouldn't it be cool to make a vinyl toy type game, right? Like, wouldn't that be cool? And one of the first version of DJ Hero was actually called Superstar DJ. It was signed with somebody else. Long story, but we actually rendered it as a vinyl toy. So all the characters, they all looked like vinyl toys. They had this kind of cool, like, kind of hard edge to them. It was pretty neat. And then we got acquired by Activision, obviously flipped the whole script and built it into the hero world, right? So I've always had in the back of my head like, oh, vinyl toys are cool. So when we were talking about what could our first game be, and how do we kind of like, how do we lean into this idea of collection, I was like, well, you know, bringing vinyl toys to life, not in the way that Skylanders did, but like in, you know, you don't need the physical. It's just the sort of theme is that this is the place where toys go to play, right? It just felt like it made a ton of sense. And then if you know anything about vinyl toys, and you know like about like you look at Dunnies and Moneys and all these kind of things, like part of their success is based on collaborations with artists, like and the ability to sell blanks that artists just paint and sell themselves, right? So it ticked all of these boxes of what we wanted to do, which was bring creators into a game, give them a path to deliver their kind of, you know, their art to people to actually play with it, like someone to have fun and play with it, and then, you know, again from blockchain point of view, and the way we're selling it and the way we're tracking everything from that, using the chain to kind of track all the sales and then track out the payouts and all that kind of cool stuff. It just seemed to make like, it was like, oh, like this is the time to go for this, right? Because I also think vinyl toys cover a broad age range, you know, like my kid is 4. He's not even 4. He like every day he comes up, Papa, Blankos? Can I play Blankos? Right? He just loves the look and feel of it. Like so, but then, you know, those of us that are a bit more older but still dig vinyl toys, it's still appealing, right? It's got that kind of cool appealing look to it. And then, you know, Dan Lish, who's one of our kind of lead concept artists, I've worked with Dan since B-Boy. Like we've just kind of been around each other ever since then, and you know, talking to him about it, and then him kind of putting his spin on this thing that was in my head, and then him taking it miles and miles further and just bringing this world to life was really cool, and it felt right. So that's kind of how it ended up where it ended up.
Yeah, and it's sort of because I'm slightly weird about these things and track it all. I think you're up to 124 or something, 123, I think, Blankos. So it's really a lot of Blankos.
Yeah, I think it's something like if you did, me and John were talking about the other day, but if you took all of our NFTs and trade volume, we'd be like number 3 in the world or something. Like it's some crazy stat he pulled out his butt the other day, and I was like, oh wow, that's insane.
But I guess coming back to your original, well, one of the points you were making before, what's interesting is you have, I think the most expensive one maybe you've dropped is maybe $500 or something. Could be wrong, could be $350, something like that. But yeah, there's been a certain level where there's been the sort of more branded ones.
The Burberry one, I think, probably.
Yeah, the Burberry one was $350, and then a whole bunch of them, probably the most of those have got out at the shop mint price of $10, and there's been a whole bunch of stuff on that. And obviously, a whole bunch of them, people can earn them in the game. You've done giveaways, and so across that 124, now on the marketplace, I think the cheapest one is, I can't remember, like $5 or something. The most expensive one is the golden ticket. The man's still hoping to get 5 million for that. He set the price at 5 million. Good luck. We'll see. So you have that. So you have that ecosystem. That you have that whole range of basically, anyone can turn up with like $20 and feel like they're getting a decent collection together, or have a bit of choice. Yeah. But the sort of collectors can equally, and even beyond that 5 million one, I think generally the most expensive, unless you're going for the really rare ones, you talk about $1,000 sort of cap, which is obviously a lot, but it for some people isn't a lot. So it's sort of quite interesting how that market has sort of worked out.
Yeah, I mean, and kind of by design, right? Like we didn't want Blankos to have a barrier to entry from a price point, right? So when the world was going crazy in NFTs and all that, crazy stuff last year as it all went nuts. We always wanted an entry point that was free, right? Because we kind of, we talk about this a lot, game first, right? We want to be game first. We want this technology to enhance what we do, what we've been doing, all been doing for a really long time, which is make cool games. So, a low price point was always important for us. Limited timers being available was important, right? Because that kind of limits how many are out there, and eventually, we'll see how things go with Epic Games will release, and more people coming in. Like, what does that do for some of those things? Is going to be really interesting. But yeah, the ability for people to just come in and get an NFT for free has always been kind of in our wheelhouse. But then we also wanted to show that this is a place where you can go and sell high-end pieces, because it's about collection, right? And not everyone's going to go and spend $350 on a Blanko, but people did, right? And it's kind of like, I'm a sneaker collector, and I'll spend money on sneakers because they're the sneakers I want. But it's my dad's like, you did what? I can get them down, Lidl for $10. I'm like, well, you can't, Dad, but anyway, whatever. So we kind of, that was kind of the point, right? We try these different things. Lots of brands are getting, they get it, right? They're interested in the space. They like the idea that what blockchain can bring to them, especially when you talk about like Burberry, right? Because they're a high-end brand, right? They're unapologetically a high-end brand. It's like, if you want a Burberry hat, it's $200. If you don't want one, that's cool. You know what I mean? Like, so for them coming in and being able to do that, and then having kind of just the tech add validity to it again is what's super interesting.
And just to sort of highlight, you did mention it in passing there, but just to highlight Blankos. I mean, I don't know. You're going now into, is it early access season 1 now? I think I can't remember the exact form, but the big thing that's happening is the first blockchain game going live on Epic Games Store in the next 4 weeks, 3 weeks, something like that. I don't know if there's an official release date. I don't think so yet, but pretty soon.
I'll just go something like that.
Yeah.
But
that's sort of the interesting. I mean, I think you've announced a while back now you had 1 million registrations. So it's not like no one's played the game before, but equally, with however many people are on Epic Games Store, that'll be a different sort of market. At the moment people have been finding it themselves, I guess. Now you have the chance to sort of be positioned for people who just are interested in games. So
I mean, we're really excited. Obviously, like I think it's a big step in a couple of ways for us. One, just in terms of like, hey, blockchain games can exist in the world, right? It doesn't need to be a big deal. You own it. This is it. It's cool. There's a game here for you to play. So I think like that, just in terms of what we believe in as a company, is a big deal for us. And then for Blankos itself, like you mentioned, right? Like Epic Game, I don't even know how many people. It's a huge amount of people, right? Are kind of got accounts on Epic Game Store. So from an eyeballs perspective, we're really excited to just sort of see how that funnel like goes, right? How many people drop in? I think Blankos does look like, sounds super arrogant, but it looks cool, right? Like we've tested it obviously, so like it tests really well, it comes back really high. People like the look of it, they want to play it. So we're excited, and the team have worked really hard to, we try new features, we take feedback from the community we have, we adjust, like we're constantly trying to adjust and move things, and which is one of the cool things about games these days compared to like when I got into it. It was like you burnt a disc, and if there was a bug, there was a bug. I mean, sorry, Whereas now you can adjust, you can change, you can listen to the community. Like it's a double-edged sword, right? Because sometimes everyone just shouts at you and then runs off.
I was going to say, I assume you're just expecting to get review bombed by lots of people queuing up, so they can just like vent. The first blockchain game on Epic Store, how dare you?
Yeah. Totally bracing myself for that. I mean, that's why I don't do Twitter or anything, because it's like, it just feels like you're letting somebody into your living room to shout at you, which just doesn't make zero sense to me. So.
Cool, but it is not just about Blankos. For a long time, it was just about Blankos, but now you actually got quite a busy sort of schedule of games coming out under the Mythical Games sort of banner. Some internal ones, some sort of external. There's different sorts of ways you're doing it. I guess the biggest one, and you've done some launching around that. I think 2 weeks ago, wasn't it? NFL Rivals. So.
Yeah.
I mean, how, from a creative point of view, I mean, the sort of sports management games are, to some degree, they're sort of meat and two veg. I mean, you sort of know what you're going to get with them. How have you sort of reinvigorated that? Why apart from just the brand, the licensing, why was that one that you sort of wanted to go for?
Yeah, well, I guess so. I think there's a couple of things to unpack there, right? So we've got NFL Rivals and then Rarity League. So Rarity League's our collection. We like we paid a lot of attention to the different collections that were coming out, and a lot of them are like, hey, come in and there's going to be something else coming. We wanted to go, well, we already make games, so come in on the collection. This is about this fan collection. There's kind of leading into the PFP thing, but building that in tandem with Rivals, which is our game, where they have actual utility in the game, right? So there's some cool stuff there. But I think the one thing that I don't know if we've done a good enough job of doing is it's not just a sports management game. It's actually a game. It's a game you can play, right? So you actually play, and what I mean by that, because obviously you play sports management games, like there's a thumbs on sticks element to it, right? You are playing the game of football, and it's cool. I've on my phone. I'd love to just be able to do this right now because the community are desperate to see it, and I'm like, well, yeah.
Stop teasing us then.
I will be done, but So it's a game. So you build a roster. Overall you're going to be buying packs, ripping packs like you would any kind of card collectible. But all of those players are going to go into your roster, right? So there's a whole free to play element as well. And that's the thing with all of our games. It's not we don't want there to be an entry point barrier. So there's an element of free to play stuff. They're not going to be necessary NFTs. And there's a whole NFT element as well with different tiering system and rarity system. So you've got this whole card collection piece. But those cards, those players, you actually build into your roster and you can play, and you build a team and you go into seasons, and there's all kinds of cool different stuff. But then where kind of Rarity League comes in, which is the collection, if you're a holder, you're going to be essentially you're going to have your own guild. So for every helmet you've got, you have your own guild. So you can invite players in, and by players, just to be specific, I mean gamers, right? Not as in, you build a traditional guild as a gaming guild. And, with Rarity League, you're going to have your own tournaments, your own events, leagues against other Rarity Leagues. The rewards are going to be different than people will be getting elsewhere. So, you can imagine those rewards are all going to be NFT based. You're going to get access to players before other people as well. So you're going to get the opportunity to go and buy those packs and those cards early and rip them and try and find the best ones, right? So, that's kind of how we're pulling those things together. Game itself, though, is definitely there's going to be a kind of management element in terms of I'm building my roster. I'm kind of training my players. I'm playing through a season. I'm also going to be able to play in other events that are more kind of up game stuff that we're building out, right? So you're going to have all that. But yeah, it's thumbs on sticks. You control the quarterback. Once you throw in the ball, whoever gets it, you control them. It's all, the whole kind of shebang is in there.
Mm-hmm. It is interesting more generally how much activity there is around sort of sports licenses at the moment. And it's interesting that, there are quite a lot of blockchain companies, but they're all sort of taking slightly different approaches. So they're, I guess, sort of so rare, but sort of, I guess, famous example as an early success game where they're, it is much more a collection thing, but then what I guess we have to call soccer, because you just said football for the other one.
I know.
In soccer, there's an enormous number of different sort of games that are going to be along that spectrum of just sort of management style to management and sort of actual gameplay. And I think there's some guys basically doing FIFA on the blockchain on that. That's what they're trying to do. It is kind of interesting how, I guess partly because that sports genre has been so sort of, I mean, obviously it's massive, but it's been sort of so stagnant in many ways for a number of years. I guess people are seeing the blockchains being a way of sort of reinvigorating some of those sort of gameplay features.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think the reason why we like it is it kind of plays into that kind of card collectibles, right? Like being a Brit, I was Panini was when I was a kid, it was collecting the Panini football stickers, right? And that was the thing. But card collectibles and whatever, right? Pokemon, that's just a big deal. And I think it just makes sense with sports stuff that season on season, right? New players, old players, even throughout the season, players' stats are changing, right? So it's a really interesting way to kind of keep delivering different things, and obviously like blockchain allows you to do something neat, and the fact that you can have these digital collectibles that have got, again, tiers of rarity and all that kind of fun stuff. And what we're doing is making sure that rarity shows up in the game as well, right? So you can imagine that the more rare player cards that you're going to get are going to look slightly differently on the pitch, or they're going to have slightly different kind of cool things they can do. But I think that's for me why I think it's interesting, because it makes sense in that whole world, right? It brings like these cards that people look at, right? And they're like, ooh, Michael Jordan from 1988 or whatever, or 98, I don't even know. But now I can do something with it, right? And I think we just want to be able to. I mean, I don't know how old you are, but I'm in my 40s, and I'm like, I want to do stuff with things I've got now. Yeah. Like generations younger than us. It's not that they want; they just expect. Like they've grown up in a digital world. The idea of all this shit I'm surrounded by, it's like, whatever, dude. I'm on Facebook, or you know what I mean? They're like, I grew up in a different space, so I need this thing to do something. So make it do something.
Mm-hmm. And the final project I want to talk about was Nitro Nation World Tour, which is I think you call it a co-development with the Estonian studio Creative Mobile, who I know sort of fairly well. They've had Nitro Nation as a free-to-play mobile game, actually for gone through various iterations for probably about a decade now. I think one of the very early sort of drag racing games. So again, I don't think much has been announced about that, apart from the sort of the title and the fact you're doing it. Really, I think it's maybe a bit further down the line. But what can you tell us about that, and why?
Yeah.
What's blockchain sort of bringing to that sort of drag race thing, and where's the creative vision there?
Seems great. It's been a great partnership with them. It's something we've got a team here working hand in hand with them, building that out, and for anything from like creative visuals all the way through to game side. But they're an amazing team. Like Nitro Nation, I think it's 75 million installs. So like a lot of people played it, and for us. Owning cars, right? Like,
exactly, it's cars.
I mean, that's what these things are all about, and showing off and having that collection makes a ton of sense. So, like, attaching that to the chain again and make like just bringing in all that stuff we've already kind of touched on, right? Like the rarity of it. This is an example. I'm not saying this is the way, but there's only so many Aston Martins in the real world, right? So if that's the case in certain games, it just makes things. There's some interesting stuff you can do with it. So. Lots more to be announced on that. Lots more coming. You going to be able to start registering and getting involved in the community soon. Some really, really fun paradigms of how we're looking, like bringing in from the blockchain world and kind of bringing into that game. But yeah, great team. But we're not just, what I would say as well is we're not just like taking a game that had 75 million installs, you know, played in that world against like CSR and all those other ones, right? We're not just taking it and like wedging blockchain in the back of it. It's a whole new game, right? There's a whole new story to it. There's a whole new setting for it. Obviously, there's whole new cars, right? And things like that. There's some really cool stuff in there. So like we're spending a lot of time still building it out as a great free-to-play game. You're just gonna own stuff. And that offers some really interesting game mechanics, which we can talk about a little bit closer to launch. And you know, I don't want to steal the team's thunder because they've done some cool shit. But you can imagine there's going to be some really fun stuff we can do with it.
Mm-hmm. It was actually interesting. I don't even know if you know this. That Creative Mobile did some very early blockchain stuff, some really weird sort of RPG things that I remember sort of fiddling around with, and so it's good to see. It's good to see that. I don't think that's not related at all to sort of what Nitro Nation is, but it's sort of interesting. In the early days, like 2019, I think they were sort of
that's right,
messing around with that stuff, and it was, you know, it didn't work. That's fine. It's an experiment, and
well, that's it. You know, so much of the stuff is an experiment right now. Like I go back to like we're still at Snake. You know?
Yeah.
So there's a long road ahead, but yeah, CM are good. Like great team, super talented. I can't wait to show some of that stuff because I just think how we've like collectively elevated that brand into what it looks like now and what it's going to be is really cool.
Yeah, cool. Good. Leave us with something to look forward to. Well, excellent. Covered a lot of stuff there, but really good, Jamie. Thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, John. That was fun.
Good. A trip down memory lane. I wonder how many people remember Codemasters and.
Oh God, Codemasters. That was such a long time ago. We built Colin McRae in a cow shed, in case anyone wants to know.
Sort of forgot as well. Colin McRae was just at the time that was the racing game, wasn't it? Really, that was the one. PlayStation 1 sort of PlayStation 2.
I would not hate it if they remastered Colin McRae 2 just so I could play it again because that was a ton of fun. But yeah. Well, thanks, John. Appreciate having us on.
No, good. Thank you, Jamie, and thank you to you guys for listening, watching, however you're consuming the podcast. We are talking to the people building out this crazy new sector of blockchain games. As I totally agree with Jamie, it's you know. No one really knows exactly what they're doing. I think we're getting some better ideas over time, but you know, plenty of innovation to go, plenty of sort of crazy curveballs to be thrown. So hopefully, talking to the people who are doing this sort of stuff is helpful to you, which is why I do it. Anyway, thanks for listening. Please subscribe to the channel, and see you again next time.